Urban Sewing Society, where we bring fashion and creativity to your neighborhood. My name is Jen and I am the Urban Sewist, and I'm so glad you joined today. If this is your first time tuning into my channel, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Also click on that bell so that you can get an update every time we release a new video. And also give me a thumbs up and leave some comments in the comment section. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And on Facebook, we have a Facebook group where people are sharing ideas of their sewing projects and asking questions. So come on over, join our group, and join the great conversation. Okay, so for today's project, it's something that I'm so excited about. The reason I'm excited about this project is because I'm taking two separate items, combining them into one to make this amazing, fashionable, artsy kind of top. So this might not be your style, but I'm hoping that some of the techniques that I use, that you can use them in some of the projects that you may be working on and get some ideas. Let's start with supplies, and then let's start working on this project. Any fitted blazer will do. I picked this one up at Unique Thrift for about half off, and I got this sweater for about $3. You'll need scissors, chalk, and your sewing machine. That's it. Okay, you want to make sure that your sweater and your blazer are approximately the same length. Then you want to make sure that you pin the blazer because the lining is going to be moving up underneath. So you want to make sure all of that stays stable. Then you want to determine how much of the sweater you intend to cut off. I didn't do as much as I should have. I wish I had gone about another inch deep, but it still worked out. Then you're also going to measure on the jacket how much of the jacket you are going to cut off. Then you want to cut the sweater under the arm, down the side, and then you're going to cut the bottoms of the sleeves off because that's where you're going to add the sleeve from the jacket. Then you lay it on top, measure it out, make sure that it's coming together. I had to reposition my jacket because I wanted more of the jacket sides to show. Then I folded it in half, and so that I would get both sides even, I cut both together because I didn't want one side being larger than the other. So that meant I still had to pin under the arm so things wouldn't move around up underneath. I also made sure that there was enough fabric left over from the sweater so that I could have a little peek of the sweater up underneath the sleeve. And as you can see here, I am still pinning under the arm so that the lining and the jacket stay together in one piece. This is really, really important. If I had a chance to do this again, I would remove the lining from the jacket because it was very difficult to work with. Now here's where it gets a little challenging. I knew exactly where I wanted to cut it, but then I was a little unsure, and I finally just went for it and started to cut because I knew what I wanted it to look like, and I figured if I didn't go ahead and make the cut, I was never going to make the cut. So here I went on ahead and I cut into the sleeve. I cut the top sleeve first, then I cut the bottom sleeve because I wanted them to be the exact same size. Again, another challenging aspect of creating this jacket, but I cut both pieces together, and here you see I cut midway through the jacket and right up to the sleeve, and I still pinned the jacket to the lining because I didn't want it moving around. It ended up moving around anyway. Again, remove the lining of the jacket if you're going to try to do this because it just makes it more complicated. It's like working with two jackets in one. So I made the cut across the front and came around under the arm and down the sleeve. And once I did this, I was ready to attach the sweater to the jacket. After laying the sweater on top and matching up the sweater with the jacket, I pinned everything on the front, one side, and then flipped it over. I lined the back of the sweater up with the back seams. I had to play around with this quite a bit because again, the lining was a little slippery. Things were starting to move around. As you can see here, they didn't really line up really well. So I just started pinning the sleeve all the way down to the sweater. One of the challenges that you'll find is that the sweater obviously is going to stretch and the jacket is not. So another thing that I should have done is run a stay stitch around the edges that I cut on the sweater. And this will keep your sweater from stretching. So I would run a good basting stitch or stay stitch from the bottom of the sweater all the way down the sleeve. And this will keep everything nice and clean and in place. Now the next step is to make a opening in the sweater to allow for this flap that I wanted to insert. And the reason I wanted to insert the flap is because I wanted it to be clear that it was a blazer sweater combination. And without the flap, it doesn't really look like a blazer. It just looks like another, maybe a shirt or something else up underneath it. So I thought the flap would be a really nice design choice. And so as you can see here, I'm starting to kind of struggle with the fabric stretching. So I used my chalk to make the mark where the flap was going to be. And I had to use my seam ripper to open up the pocket that was attached to the sweater. And I had to make an opening to put the flap in here. So obviously that took a few minutes. Once I opened that flap and I cut the sweater, I pinned it into place to hold it in place. When I took this to the sewing machine, I just stitched it down with my sewing machine. And then I opened it up enough so that I could stick that flap in there. And that actually worked out okay. Here I'm still kind of trying to straighten out the sweater and the back of the jacket, and I'm telling you, this was extremely challenging. I would definitely do some basting stitches along the edge to cut out this process. Now to add the flaps, they fit into the jacket perfectly. I just had to use my seam ripper to open it up just a little bit more. I put it in there, pinned it down. When I took it to the sewing machine, I thought I was going to have to hand sew it, but I was able to get the flap in there just good enough, pin it down and stitch on top. And the only part that I ended up having to hand stitch was the top part of the sweater. Right here where you see I'm folding it in, that's the part that I had to hand stitch. Other than that, it came together very nicely. Another little touch was to add a pop of the sleeve at the bottom of the sleeve for the jacket. I thought that that would kind of make it look like I was wearing a sweater underneath the jacket. So it kind of gives the illusion that there's a sweater underneath. And so I just cut a few inches off of the sweater, lined it up, made sure it was even. And I went to the sewing machine and I stitched very close to the edge. I didn't want to have to hand sew where I didn't have to. And luckily I was able to just stitch around the edge, and that also came together very nicely as well. And we can't forget about the fabric brooch that I added. I just used some strips of fabric that I had laying around. I took some of the old stitches out, cut it up. One of the things that I would make sure to do next time if I wanted to make a fabric brooch was to use some frayed check, because the threads from the brooch were all over the sweater. A couple finishing touches. Obviously needs a good press, but I tried it on and there was some extra fabric here in the waistline that needed to be taken out. So I tried it back on, I pinned it on myself, and I took in some darts in the waistline because I wanted it to fit more like a sweater and less like a jacket. So after I put the other flap in the other side, I went back to the sewing machine, took it in, and got a much better fit after that. Well, if there's one word to describe this project, I would say phew, because it was challenging. but I really love the way it turned out. A couple things that I really like about it. One, I love that the jacket peeps out from underneath the sweater in the front. Adding this little buckle in the back really gave the sweater that much more shape. So I'm glad I included that. I love this little brooch. I took it on and off because I wanted to see whether or not I really liked it, and then I added it to the tam, which is an inside out tam made from the leftover fabric of the sweater, and I really loved that a lot. So I thought it was really cute. I thought it really represented my style, and I would totally do this project again, making sure that I concentrated on those areas that I definitely find I could improve. So hope you enjoyed it. I hope you try this at home. Please put some comments below. Let me know what you think. And if you try it at home, please tag me on social. All right? Thanks a lot. See you next week.